Scary telling.
I had just moved into a new house with my family, and we were all excited to start our new lives there. But there was something strange about the house that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was an old house, and it creaked and groaned at night, which was unsettling. But that wasn't the worst of it. One night, my 6-year-old sister was staying at my grandma's house, so I had the room to myself. I was dozing off, feeling safe and secure in my own bed, when I heard a faint voice coming from inside her closet. "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" it said. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, thinking that I must be dreaming. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" I got out of bed, walked over to the closet, and opened the door. Inside, I saw my sister's toy McDonald's cash register with a drive-through radio that would play a recording if you pressed a button. It must have been accidentally triggered. I took it out of the toy box and turned it off before setting it on a shelf where it wouldn't be disturbed. I climbed back into bed and tried to fall asleep, but my heart was racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. About 20 minutes later, I was just starting to drift off when I heard a voice whisper, "I would like chicken McNuggets, please." I bolted out of bed, turned on the light, and looked around the room. There was no one there. I was alone. I realized that the voice had come from the toy cash register, even though it was turned off. I decided to get rid of the toy once and for all. I put it in a bag and threw it in the trash outside. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Over the next few nights, strange things began to happen. I would hear footsteps in the hallway outside my room, even though no one was there. I would see shadows moving across the wall, even though there was no one in the room with me. And every night, I would hear the same voice whispering, "I would like chicken McNuggets, please." I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. I couldn't sleep, and I was becoming increasingly paranoid. I even started seeing things out of the corner of my eye during the day. One day, I decided to investigate. I went outside to the trash can where I had thrown the toy cash register, and I saw that it was gone. Someone or something had taken it out of the trash and brought it back into the house. I went back inside and searched the house, but I couldn't find it. That's when I heard the voice again, louder than ever before. "I would like chicken McNuggets, please." I turned around, and there it was, sitting on my desk, even though I had thrown it away. I couldn't believe it. I picked it up and tried to turn it off, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I realized that the toy was haunted. It wasn't just some malfunction or coincidence. It was being controlled by something else, something sinister. Over the next few days, things got worse. The voice became more frequent and more aggressive. It would say things like, "I'm hungry. I need food. Give me chicken McNuggets." I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get rid of it for good. I decided to bury it in the backyard, hoping that would finally be the end of it. But as I was digging the hole, I heard something behind me. I turned around, and there was a figure standing there, watching me. It was tall and thin, with pale skin and sunken eyes. It didn't say anything, but I could feel its presence, and I knew it was the one controlling the toy cash register. I tried to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The figure moved towards me, and I could hear the voice of the toy, louder than ever. "I would like chicken McNuggets, please." Suddenly, everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in my bed, and it was morning. I thought it had all been a nightmare, but then I saw the toy cash register sitting on my nightstand, turned on and playing the recording on a loop. I knew then that I had to get out of that house. I grabbed my things and left, never looking back. I never found out what had happened to the toy or the figure that had been controlling it, but I knew that I never wanted to experience anything like that again. To this day, I can still hear the voice of the toy in my nightmares, and I know that the haunted toy cash register will always be a part of me, haunting me for the rest of my life. I never believed in ghosts until my dad told me this story. It's been years since he shared it with me, but it still gives me chills every time I think about it. When my dad was a teenager, he had his own little bedroom outside in a shed. He spent most of his time there, listening to music and hanging out with friends. One night, he woke up to the sound of crackling flames. At first, he thought it was just a dream, but as he sat up, he realized the shed was really on fire. The flames were too strong for him to do anything but run. He made it out safely, but he was in shock. How had this happened? The shed was completely destroyed, and he had no idea what had caused it. As he stood there, watching the fire department put out the flames, he saw something that made his blood run cold. In the window of the main house, he saw his grandmother. She'd been dead for years, but there she was, staring back at him. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was just his imagination, but when he looked again, she was still there. He was too freaked out to stay outside, so he ran into the house to see if it was really her. When he got into the kitchen, he looked out the window to see that his shed was in flames. He couldn't believe it. How had he not seen it before? He turned to his grandmother, hoping for an explanation, but she just looked at him sadly. "I tried to warn you, son," she said softly. "But you didn't listen." My dad didn't know what to say. He was still in shock, and now he was talking to a ghost. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I've been watching over you, my boy," she said. "I knew something was going to happen, and I tried to warn you. But you didn't listen." My dad was at a loss for words. He didn't know what to say, but he knew he had to do something. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know. What can I do now?" His grandmother just looked at him and smiled sadly. "It's too late for that now," she said. "But you can learn from this. Listen to your instincts and don't ignore the signs. They're there for a reason." And with that, she disappeared. My dad never forgot that night. He always wondered if he had listened to his grandmother, if he could have prevented the fire. But he learned a valuable lesson, and he passed it on to me. Listen to your instincts and don't ignore the signs. They could be a warning from beyond the grave. I grew up hearing my dad's stories about the farm he grew up on, but one story, in particular, always sent shivers down my spine. It was about the unexplained deaths of their cattle. My dad's family had a small farm that they inherited from his grandparents. They had a few cows, and they took pride in taking care of them. One morning, my dad and his siblings went out to the pasture, and they found one of their cows had been killed. It wasn't just any ordinary death. The cow had been methodically cut open, and its organs were missing. There were no animal tracks around the body, and the surrounding ground was undisturbed. My dad's family was horrified, and they didn't know what to do. They called the authorities, but no one could explain what happened. They chalked it up to a random act of violence, but as time went on, it became clear that something more sinister was at play. Over the next few years, more cows were killed in the same way. Each time, my dad's family searched for clues, but they always came up empty-handed. They even hired private investigators to try to solve the mystery, but no one could find any leads. As the years went on, my dad's family became increasingly unsettled. They started locking their doors at night, and they would jump at any sound they heard outside. They became paranoid that whoever or whatever was killing their cows would come after them next. One day, my dad's family was out in the field, tending to their cows, when they heard a strange noise coming from the nearby woods. It was a low growl, like nothing they had ever heard before. They looked up and saw a figure in the distance, standing perfectly still. It was hard to make out what it was, but as they got closer, they realized it was a large, black dog. Its eyes glowed in the sunlight, and its fur was matted and unkempt. They had never seen a dog like this before, and it sent chills down their spines. The dog didn't move as they approached, and my dad's family cautiously circled around it. They could see that it was covered in blood, and its teeth were sharp and pointed. The dog just stared at them, and they knew it was waiting for something. Suddenly, the dog lunged at them, barking and snarling. My dad's family ran for their lives, trying to get away from the vicious animal. They could hear it chasing after them, its growls getting louder and more ferocious. Finally, they made it back to the house, locking the doors behind them. They could hear the dog outside, scratching and clawing at the door, trying to get inside. It went on like this for hours, until finally the sun started to rise, and the dog disappeared into the woods. My dad's family never saw the dog again, but they knew it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. They eventually sold the farm and moved away, but the memory of that terrifying experience stayed with them forever. To this day, no one knows what killed their cows, or what that black dog was. But one thing is for sure, there are some things in this world that we'll never understand, and some secrets that are better left buried. When I was a child, my family and I lived in Bell Gardens, California. Our house was an old one with a crawl space underneath it. My sister would always come running to her parents' room at night, crying and telling them that she could hear a man talking. At first, we thought it was just her imagination, but soon we realized that something strange was happening in our house. One night, we were all woken up by the sound of my dad screaming. He had seen the man my sister had been hearing. My dad was a brave man, but what he saw that night made him lose his nerve. He described the man as being tall and thin, with a pale face and sunken eyes. The man had been standing at the end of the hallway, watching us as we slept. The next day, we called a priest to come to our house and bless it. But that didn't help. My dad and his brothers decided to investigate the crawl space under the house to see if they could find anything. They thought that maybe someone was living down there. As they crawled through the dark, cramped space, they heard strange noises. They thought that it might be rats, but as they got closer to the end, they realized that it was something else entirely. They found a body wrapped in army blankets. My dad and his brothers called the police, and we were not allowed back in our home for a week. When we returned, everything had changed. The house felt different, like it was cursed. We moved out of the house the following year. Years later, I asked my dad what he had seen that night. He told me that he had seen the man in the crawl space. He had been the one making the strange noises my sister had been hearing. My dad also said that the man had been dead for a long time and that his body had been hidden under our house for years. I never forgot about the man in the crawl space. The memory of that night haunted me for years. I couldn't help but wonder who he was and why he had been hiding in our house. I still get chills thinking about it to this day. The scariest part of the story was not the man himself, but the fact that we had been living in that house with him for years without knowing. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest things in life are the ones that are hidden right under our noses. I hope that whoever finds this story takes heed of the lesson I learned. Never ignore the strange noises in your house. You never know what could be lurking in the shadows. My family has always told the story of how my great-great-grandmother almost went on the Titanic. She had bought a ticket and was planning to travel to America, but at the last minute, she fell ill and had to cancel her trip. It's a story that's been passed down for generations, and every time I hear it, it sends shivers down my spine. It's not that the story is supernatural or anything like that, but it's just creepy to think about. If my great-great-grandmother had gone on the Titanic, there's a good chance she would have died, and I never would have been born. The thought of what might have been is enough to keep me up at night. What if she had been feeling better and had decided to go on the trip? What if she had changed her mind at the last minute and decided to travel on a different ship? The possibilities are endless, but they all lead to the same place, my family never existing. I've always been fascinated by the Titanic, but after hearing this story, I can't help but feel a sense of dread whenever I think about it. The idea that something as simple as an illness could change the course of history is both fascinating and terrifying. It's a reminder that we never know what the future holds, and that the choices we make can have far-reaching consequences. Every decision we make, no matter how small, can have a ripple effect that echoes through time. I don't know what to make of my great-great-grandmother's decision not to go on the Titanic. Was it fate, or just a stroke of luck? Either way, it's a story that will always give me chills. As I sit here, thinking about what might have been, I can't help but wonder what other stories have been lost to history. What other lives were saved or lost by a simple twist of fate? The world is full of mysteries, and some of them are far more terrifying than anything supernatural. The legacy of the Titanic lives on, not just in the stories of those who survived, but in the stories of those who never made it on board. It's a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment we have. As I think about my great-great-grandmother's story, I'm reminded of how lucky I am to be alive. And I'm grateful for every day that I get to spend with my family, knowing that without that illness all those years ago, I might never have existed.